All right, welcome everybody, and you are tuned in to the High Performance All Electric Home and part of Sustainable Building Week. There's a lot of, there's a lot of great stuff going on this week. We're excited to be part of Electrification Day. But if you're not aware of it, there's a lot of other really good sessions that are still going to be happening this week. So check out the calendar that's available on sustainablebuildingweek.org. And tune into some of the other great sessions. I want to give a thanks to all of our sponsors for Sustainable Building Week. Without them, really would be hard to do this. And we also want to give a shout out to all the collaborating organizations, a lot of which are putting together the content for this week. So thank you to all those organizations. Before we introduce ourselves, I just want to cover off on what you're going to be hearing from us today. High performance all electric homes. We're going to give some backgrounds on the trends that are going on in home energy that have happened over the decades, which really are leading up to where we are today. The trends that are happening in building codes, there's a lot of exciting developments in that area, many of which support electrification. We're going to spend the majority of our time talking about the advantage of all electric new construction and the specific technologies that make that possible. But we're also going to be along the way talking about why people like them, because that's an important aspect of all of this. If people don't like this stuff, they're not going to be happy. So we'll touch on that. And then because some of these technologies are new to people, even though they've been around for a while, we'll talk about reliability information, the warranties that come with this kind of equipment. And then we're going to end with a really exciting piece on Going Street Commons, which is a fantastic example of all new electric construction, really beautiful project here in Portland. And we'll be referencing some of the other all electric developments that are going on in the city today. I want to mention one thing right off, which is high performance homes, which is the topic of this conversation, is, it's a combination of the way the home is built, what we would call the envelope, and also then the fuel choices that are used in the way you power that home to make it work, function, and make it comfortable, etc. We're not going to be spending a lot of time today on the envelope. We'll talk a little bit about that in Going Street, but for the most part, we're talking about the devices that are inside the home that you're using to power your home and the fuel choices associated with that. So let's introduce ourselves. My name is Brian Stewart. I'm the founder of Electrify now. My background is in product design and manufacturing. I was the vice president of sustainable innovation at Nike for many years before I retired. When I left there, I founded Electrify now because I was frustrated that there was not good information out there to help homeowners understand how they can be part of this electrification movement to dramatically reduce their own emissions, have a more comfortable life, and also really be an important part of this transition to a clean, renewable energy system that's required for our planet to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Joe, do you want to chime in?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Great to be with you. My name is Joe Warchunas. I'm an electrification advocate with Electrify Now. And also I'm a program manager at the nonprofit Fourth, where we promote transportation electrification. So all things electrification are in my wheelhouse and are part of my passion. So great to be here with this topic. I'm also a writer at Clean Technica. I put a little chat, a link in the chat about an article on this presentation covering a lot of the same material that we had published today. So great to be with you all.
Josh, you want to introduce yourself?
Well, first off, thanks to Brian and Joe for inviting me to this to talk about Going Street Commons at the end. My name is Josh Salinger. I'm the founder and CEO of Birdsmouth Design-Build, also a board member of Passive House Northwest, and sit on the technical committee of Zero Energy Ready Oregon, Zero. Also a FIA certified builder and an Earth Advantage sustainable homes professional, focused mostly on building zero energy, high performance, and all electric homes. So thank you. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it's great to have Josh here. And like he said, it's mostly going to be Joe and I at the beginning here, but if you have questions about anything along the way, stick it in the chat. And Josh, tons of experience with building homes, all electric homes and low energy homes. And so I think between the three of us, we'll be able to answer any questions you have. So yeah, please bombard us with questions. We're going to try to have some time at the end for some Q&A as well, but we can answer them along the way. Okay, so let's back up a little bit just to go a little history. Some of you might not realize this, but back in the 50s, there was a really concerted campaign effort that went on between the electric utilities, a lot of manufacturers of electric appliances. The federal government was even involved in helping to promote electricity in homes. And at the time, electricity was not as prevalent as it is today. And so there were still homes that were getting onto electricity in the first place. But the idea of electrifying your home to achieve, to get off of wood burning for heat and even for cooking, which was not uncommon at that time. This campaign, when they employed some really hotshot celebrities to get the word out, but it was about really promoting this idea of a modern, clean, convenient home that was more comfortable and had more light and more power to make living just more comfortable and convenient. So it was a really big effort. And for the 10 or 20 years almost, there was really a lot of progress that was made about electrifying our homes. In the 70s, we had the energy crisis that some of you may remember. And this time, things like automobile fuel efficiency became a really big thing. You're starting to get things like the Pinto came around, one of the first fuel efficient cars. And there was a lot of emphasis put on efficiency and the realization that you could get heating for cheaper by burning gas directly in your homes. It was cheaper than electric heat by quite a bit. And still is the case to this day. We'll talk about the developments that have happened in technology that change that. But the electric resistance heating, which was all that was available at this time, paled in comparison to the efficiency you could get with gas. So this idea of cheaper, clean, and this notion of the clean blue flame was part of the messaging that started in the 70s, and it's with us to this day, really. But this idea of efficient, cheap gas was started to really come on in the 70s. And like I said, that idea is still prevalent. In the 90s, we started to get more focused even on the efficiency of the appliances. And there were things that were going on in the regulation space, and with Energy Star came on to make it really obvious to people which appliances were more efficient than others, so consumers could make good decisions that would affect their cost of operations. And so this idea of really high efficiency appliances was kind of the way to be a good environmentalist and also to save yourself money. And so this example here of a tankless gas on-demand water heater is kind of the poster child for efficiency. And that really, in a lot of people's minds, that's still the benchmark. And so I think what we're going to talk about today is how there are new developments that blow this away in terms of efficiency, cost of operations, and carbon emissions. So the reason why there's these changes have happened has to do with two really big things that happened in the last 20 years. The first is that electric appliances have got dramatically more efficient. And when I say dramatic, we're talking about 3 to as much as 10 times more efficient than the appliances that we'd been used to. The LED light bulb is kind of the poster child for this, that it's over 10 times more efficient than an incandescent bulb because it doesn't waste any energy in heat. And so while we're mostly going to be talking about HVAC and water heating and that kind of thing, which absorbs way more energy than LEDs and lighting, but lighting went through this dramatic transformation and many other things did as well. At the same time, you've got this phenomenon where the electric grid is getting way cleaner. And this is because coal-fired energy generation has diminished. A lot of coal plants are being retired. In fact, just last week, we got news that Boardman closed here in Oregon, which is fantastic. We should have a party to celebrate. That means there's no coal-fired generation in Oregon any longer. They retired that plant ahead of schedule in order to meet their promises on cleaning up the grid. And this is happening all over the country. So almost every week, you're going to get if you're paying attention, you'll see that there's another coal plant retiring, or there's more renewable energy generation going online, which is dramatically cleaning up the grid. You can see that the grid is emitting a lot less carbon than it did 20 years ago now. And this curve is going to continue to go down as renewable energy grows and grows. The other thing that's happening that's really interesting, that's accelerating these changes, are the legislation that's happening in, there's stuff happening in Massachusetts and New York. I'm going to talk mostly about the West Coast. California here is kind of leading the way as usual. They passed a bill a couple of years ago under Jerry Brown, which mandated overall emissions reductions, but they also specifically called out a 40% reduction in building emissions by 2030, which is really amazing because, a lot of times states will have a overall carbon reduction goal, but specifying that from buildings is really important. What that did is it freed up millions of dollars worth of government money in the form of incentives, primarily for heat pumps, which are now really widely available in California, making the cost of transition lower. But the other interesting thing, more from a grassroots level, from the ground up, there's now 35 cities that have all enacted some form of a gas-free building commitment for new construction, and an electrification reach code, one of those things, which is basically promoting the idea of building all electric new construction and making it almost impossible to build new construction with natural gas as the primary power source for heat. This is happening really fast. When we started this presentation, I think it was 34 cities, and it's now 35. Really exciting. In Washington, there's similar things going on. There's two really important pieces of legislation that were passed in the last year that establish energy performance standards for commercial buildings. They require more stringent requirements for either the envelope to be more heavily insulated, or the appliances to be more high efficiency in terms of their point system. And they're really providing incentives for lower energy use and urging people to get off of natural gas. In Oregon, there's some really exciting things that have yet to take shape, but with the executive order from Governor Brown, she set these dramatic levels for carbon reductions, overall carbon reduction, 45% by 2035 and 80% by 2050. But she also called out for some specific energy efficiency goals for new buildings, a 60% reduction by 2030. And basically, if you look into that and you imagine how you're going to get a 60% reduction in energy efficiency, there's almost no way to do it without some of these technologies that we're going to be talking about today. And the code that's underway now, there will go through 3 code cycles over the next 10 years that will reinforce those goals. So that's the kind of the background in terms of the trends in energy and the legislation that's happening that's pushing everything towards all electric homes. But there's also other really good reasons to do that have nothing to do with legislation.
Exactly. And we gave this presentation at HBA last week, Home Builders Alliance, and their Build Right conference. And so in front of a builders crowd, we were saying that going all electric gets you ahead of the curve. We see this legislation that's in pipelines or that's already here, and encouraging or mandating all electric homes and buildings. So getting ahead of it, getting ahead of the curve as a builder is a great idea. Even as a homeowner is a great idea, because as we see in California, this can happen quickly. But at this section of the presentation, we want to profile some of the great reasons to go electric beyond the mandating and just the overall trends. So the first one is sustainability, and we've talked a little bit about that. It's the lowest cost method for building decarbonization. There are studies that are out there, and there's a whole buffet of choices we can make to decarbonize our buildings and our lives, and electrification is proven to be the lowest cost and most readily available solution to decarbonizing buildings. And the reason for that is that space and water heating are some of our largest carbon emissions from the average home. And you're just going to get a 50% reduction by going to some of this efficient electrification. And then when you combine that, and we'll talk about with buying renewable energy or producing energy on your rooftop, you can be 0% carbon emitting. So it's just the way to get our homes sustainable and answer the challenge of our times is to go all electric. Our next reason that we want to highlight is air quality. And a lot of us in the Northwest and West Coast in general have been living in a time where outdoor air quality is really front and center. You know, we're checking the particulate count levels, and you know, we're nervous about going outside. A lot of times we don't think about indoor air quality. And Josh just sent us an article in the Atlantic that we'll put in the chat room as well, about how, you know, burning gas indoors, especially for cooking, puts a lot of harmful emissions into the home. And with an all-electric home and with induction cooking, you get 0 air pollutants from combustion, 0 carbon monoxide, 0 nitrogen dioxide, no leaks or gas vapor. So this is kind of an overlooked but really important reason to have an all-electric household. Our next reason is the performance. Another thing, link we'll put in the chat room, is we had a great webinar last month with a chef who specializes in induction cooking, and to talk about the performance that you get from induction stoves. You can go on and on. We did a whole hour episode on that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation, but we'll also put the deeper dive into induction stoves. And beyond induction stoves, you know, every electric appliance gives you a lot more precision and control. A lot of these are Wi-Fi enabled, they're smart. I'm in one of the PGE test beds here in Portland, so I can be paid so that the utility can use my water heater during times of peak demand. So another opportunity to earn income for average families. So the performance aspect of electrification is just a huge plus. And then our final benefit to an all-electric home that we want to highlight is a couple points on cost. First of all, there's cost of installation. Usually, we're finding the sticker prices for all-electric technologies that we'll profile in just a second are usually a little bit higher than some of their gas and old electric counterparts. But those prices are coming down, which is amazing. We're seeing some heat pump water heaters that are, with installation costs included, are lower than the average gas water heater. We're seeing induction stoves come in for under $1,000, so that's exciting. But usually, on the average, the sticker price is higher. But when you consider the cost for piping, building gas infrastructure, piping it to your house, putting the gas infrastructure in your house, studies say that a builder usually saves about $6,400 by not putting in that gas infrastructure. So there's less cost on just installation. And then there's also, of course, less cost on operation. These heat pumps, as we'll profile in a second, are 3 to 5 times more efficient than gas and old electric resistance. And so you're going to save a really good amount of money. We'll show you kind of exactly what that looks like. And then one other savings is that when you're not connected to the gas line, you save in the gas connection fee. This is a huge moneymaker for gas companies, is just to be connected to all the people connected to their systems and charging that fee. So that's usually what, $12 to $13 a month. So it's a couple $100 a year, but that can be really valuable for all of us, and including those with lower incomes. So lots of potential for savings from being all electric.
Joyce, I noticed there's a question in the chat here about the cost effects of going all electric on low income communities. And it's a good question. We won't go deep on it here, but a couple things. One, you know, there's some really interesting things that are going on around rate class differentiation, so that, you know, we don't get in a situation where, you know, more affluent people electrify and leave behind low income communities to get higher and higher gas bills. So there's work going on around that in Oregon, which is really exciting. But also, I think it's a good point that these things are capital intensive changes. Once you get on the other side of them, as Joe pointed out, there's a lot of operational savings to be had, but those are difficult transitions for people who have lower access to capital. Low income communities is a good example of that. And it's why, you know, we need good incentives and we need good policy to make this happen for everybody. We're not going to talk a lot about that today if you want, but we are going to touch on that really more deeply in a webinar that we're doing next week. with Oriana Maniero from Verde and Charity Fain from Community Energy Project, where we're talking specifically about that. If you want to tune in, maybe we'll try to put a note in that on the chat. So, all right, so now those are the benefits. You've heard a little bit about the regulations and legislation that's coming. What are the technologies that make this happen? We're going to talk about 4 really key electric technologies that really are essential in order to make, to kind of like get people what they need and what they want in a really high performance home. So we'll talk about heat pump water heaters, the furnaces and AC, induction, which Joe mentioned, and also fireplace inserts, which a lot of people don't talk about, but that's one of the reasons why new homes in particular use gas, is because the gas fireplace is seen as like a really important feature, particularly here in the Northwest where we get a little colder winters. But let's start by, and we'll talk about each of those, but let's start by just talking about heat pumps in general. I think this, most people, if you say, hey, what's a heat pump? They'll say, I have no idea. And they are a little bit hard to explain, and they're a little bit magic feeling in a way once you get to know them. But on the other hand, they're incredibly familiar because we've all grown up with them in our lives. The refrigerator is the best example of that. And we all have these in our homes, and the way they work is that they are moving the heat from inside the refrigerator out of that very tightly sealed box into your kitchen. So basically your kitchen is getting slightly warmer, and the space inside the refrigerator, even the freezer that works the same way, gets colder. And so if you've ever put your hand behind a refrigerator, you felt that warm air coming from back there, that's because that's the heat that's being pulled out of the inside of your refrigerator. Now, the way that's done is slightly complicated. I'm not going to go into that explanation, but it's insanely energy efficient, which is why it's such an important technology. The same technology is being used for air conditioners, which have also been in our lives for most of the time that we've been on the planet, most of us here. So the technology is not new. What's new is the way it's being applied. And so let's talk first about water heaters, because this is one of the things I have to say, when I retired from Nike a few years ago and decided to go into this, and I was a sustainability professional, that was my job. And I didn't even know that these things existed. And they've been around for over 10 years, but they've really in the last probably 5 years started to become readily available and more of a thing, if you will, in terms of who's making them, how available they are, and how well they're working. So let's talk about how they work. Basically, they're a tank like any other. They're roughly the same size, but what they have on top is they have this evaporator and compressor unit. That's the heat pump part. And then below it, there's a tank that holds the water with a coil around it, just like any other tank, and where that coil is heating the water inside the receptacle. So what the heat pump is doing is it's blowing air across these coils inside that top area, and it's essentially sucking the heat out of that air and concentrating it into the what's called the refrigerant, that fluid that is in the pipes that goes down around the water chamber. So the space that this is in gets slightly cooler, and it concentrates that heat into the tank. And they're incredibly efficient. So a good way of thinking about efficiency is in terms of the cost it takes to operate them. And so we've done this calculation to show like how many hot showers you can get for $10 worth of fuel with these 4 different technologies. And we're talking about 10-minute shower here. So for some of you that may seem like, well, that's crazy. But if any of you have teenagers, you'll know that 10 minutes is nothing for a hot shower. So we'll say for an electric resistance hot water heater, you're going to get three hot showers for $10 worth of electricity. Natural gas is better. I mean, if you have a typical gas-fired water tank, you're getting 5 to maybe 6 if you've got a really high efficiency one. Tankless is slightly better. You'll get more like 6 or 7 for $10, but a heat pump blows these away. You're going to get 10 or maybe more with electric heat pump because they're so energy efficient. And the same translates to yearly operating costs. These numbers are from, there's a lot of information on the slide, but if you look at those yellow bars at the bottom, those are the stickers that come on the device from Energy Star. They'll tell you how much it typically costs to operate the device. So it's a pretty apples to apples comparison of these 5 different technologies. What we've got is the best case electric resistance, which I would highly recommend you don't do, which is going to cost you over $400 a year to operate. A typical gas one will be more like $200 to $300. And then if you get a really efficient gas water heater, which almost nobody is doing because they're insanely expensive, but that'll lower your cost to about $200. The tankless that we mentioned are also expensive, but not as bad. They're they're getting lower cost. They're not outrageous. That will be quite a bit lower, about $190. But again, if you go for the best heat pump that's available, or even a good heat pump, you're going to be in the low hundreds for operating costs. And the price on these has come down dramatically so that they're starting to be one of the cheaper options that are even available, partly due to incentives and partly due to just the more of them being sold. If you look at the carbon emissions from these 5 different options, however, it's, the heat pump blows the competition away. I mean, it's a fraction of even the best natural gas solution. And as Joe mentioned earlier, if you sign up for renewable energy from your utility, or if you have solar on your roof, this can go to 0 carbon emissions, which you will never be able to do with anything that's gas fired. So in terms of reliability, I think the best information we have on this comes from the manufacturers themselves, and it's reflected in the warranties that they give, which gives you an idea of the confidence they have in the technology. The electric resistance technology is the simplest technology. It's been around for decades and decades, and so the warranties tend to be longest there. Gas is also pretty simple technology, but you'll see that about half the amount of time that the manufacturer will give you for a warranty, and heat pumps are in between, longer than gas, but a little shorter than the electric one. So I think this is a good reflection on the confidence that the manufacturers have in the reliability of the technology. It's important to know that there are some things you need to know when you install these in terms of where they can go. They are best in an unconditioned space because they're cooling the space. So you don't want it in your living room or something like that, obviously, because it's going to cool down your living room. If you have a utility room that's large enough, if it's over about 700 cubic feet of space, that will work. Garages are perfect. We have ours in our basement, which is fantastic. It dehumidifies the space, so it dries out your basement if you've got a slightly damp basement, which is fantastic. It does require 240 volts and 30 amps of current. So in some cases, it means rewiring or putting in a new circuit. And it needs a condensate drain. None of these things are outrageous, but they just are things you need to know when if you're putting them into your home. So it's definitely the highest efficiency, lowest cost option, lowest carbon emissions by far. They're quiet. They're much quieter. We replaced our power vent gas model with the heat pump, and it's definitely quieter than that. And the internet connectivity is really handy if you're coming and going or want to adjust it while you're away from home. Okay, let's transition to furnaces and air conditioners. It's the same technology, but here it applied to keeping your house warm or cooling it. And it's basically, there's a couple different versions of them. And Josh at the end is going to talk about a third option, but basically they all have some form of outside condenser and evaporator unit. It's basically the equivalent to what we just talked about that was on top of the water heater. In this case, it's outside. So it's going to be, if it's heating your home, it's sucking the warmth from outside and putting it into that refrigerant that's translated into one of these 2 things on the inside of your house. Either a big thing like an air handler, which is very similar to a furnace that you would have if it was a gas or electric furnace, is connected to your ducting system in your home. And that's going to blow warm air through your home. Or there's another option of what's called mini splits, these heads that are on the wall. You can have multiples attached to one outside condenser unit. And these do the same thing. They move air through your home. And these are the cheapest and most efficient, and they're amazing. I don't know if you can see them here. I've got one in my studio right up there on the back wall. They're fantastic. Yeah, so all of these options work basically the same way. It depends on how your home is set up. This information comes from NEA, Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and it's about the cost per 100,000 BTUs of useful heat. And we use the word useful, and it's really important here because we're talking about what you feel. And so you can see electric resistance is, again, the worst option. If you think here about baseboard heating, and any of you who have experienced that, you know that if you're sitting right next to the baseboard or standing there, you'll feel the heat. But if you're in the middle of the room, you might not notice it, which is why you have to crank those things in order to get your room comfortable, which is why it takes so much money to heat. Average gas furnace can be dramatically cheaper. A good heat pump is going to be cheaper than that. The very best high efficiency gas furnaces will be somewhat cheaper. And then again, ductless heat pumps are the cheapest. So the way I think of it is a good heat pump solution, whether it's ductless or ducted, is going to be at least cost equivalent to what you're going to get from gas heating. But when it comes to carbon emissions, again, the heat pumps blow the competition away. You're going to be half or less what you can get from even the best gas furnaces that are out there. And again, if you fire this with renewable energy, these emissions here will go to zero, which is, again, not possible any other way. This is some really good information from Consumer Reports. They did surveys with literally tens of thousands of their members to get feedback on their experiences with gas and with heat pump furnaces and air conditioners. And by the way, I forgot to mention, a heat pump, one of the things that's amazing about it is it's giving you heat, but also air conditioning it with exactly the same equipment, which we'll talk a bit more about later. But that's something your furnace can't do. Your gas furnace is going to heat, and you're going to have a separate system to cool your home. So here you get it all in one system. But the expected life, and keep in mind, this is looking backwards. So this is some of the systems that were put in place here that they were getting information on are 20 years old or more. So things have gotten better since then, but nonetheless, I think this is good information about what you can expect around 15 years of useful life. I've seen much higher than that, but I think that's a good number to think of. A little bit less than a gas system, but competitive, and roughly the same in terms of when you might need to repair it, and roughly the same amount of money that you might need to spend in order to repair it. The warranties are very similar in terms of their duration. So it's a heating and cooling with one system, which is fantastic. And here, as our summers get warmer and indoor air quality is more of a problem, you can't open your windows to cool it. That's a really nice feature to have. You can get ducted or ductless, like we mentioned. There's a variety of kind of levels of efficiency and sophistication of these systems, from single stage to ones that have different levels of operation or variable capacity, which again can give you more comfort. One of the things that's fantastic about heat pumps is that they tend to work with more air moving through the house, because it's, instead of firing up this giant, really high temperature gas furnace and then turning it on and off, you're basically operating a lower temperature heat for more prolonged durations. And so it relies on more air movement, which means better filtration. And that's something you can notice in a home that has one of these.
Great. There's some really great questions coming in. I think Josh is going to answer a lot of them on heat pumps in his presentation. Real quick, Kathy Nicholson just said, when you're calculating and comparing greenhouse gas emissions from each option, do you factor in the typical average leakage of refrigerant over the life of the equipment? And I'll answer that quickly. We had in a heat pump water heater webinar, we had some of our friends at New Buildings Institute do some of the math to factor in the refrigerant leakage, because a lot of the refrigerants used are greenhouse gases. And even factoring in the refrigerant uses, it's just vastly cleaner. And if I can, I'll try to share that with everyone afterwards, if I can pull up the exact calculations on that. For the sake of time, I'm going to go through our induction cooking somewhat quickly because I put in the chat room the deep dive we did last month on it. So please, I really highly encourage you to watch that webinar. It's just fantastic. There are so many advantages to induction cooking. Let's talk a little bit about the technology. There's a glass surface. Underneath, there's these copper magnetic coils that create a magnetic field, and that magnetic field heats the metal, the magnetic metal in your pan. So you need magnetic pans to cook on induction. And so you don't heat the space underneath it, you heat the pan itself. And we'll see in a second that that gives speed and quality that is missing from any other type of cooking. And then it has these digital knobs or controls that really give incredible precision, that performance and precision we were talking about. Rochelle in our induction webinar said that because these controls are so precise that she feels like going to a gas oven or a gas stovetop where you're trying to look at the flame and gauge how much that is like cooking in an oven without a temperature dial. So these really give you that incredible precision. Let's see some of the other benefits of the induction technology. Of course, you get that this performance is incredible. It's half the time to heat water as gas and electric. So you have to get used to how fast induction is because it's heating the pan or pot directly. And similar to that, it's half the time to heat and a third or half the time to cool down because again, you're not heating the space underneath. So so there's less heat all around, and that's great for safety. I've got 2 toddlers, and that's really important. And it's also great just for cooking precision. You can cook and cool and control your temperature really quickly with induction that is unique amongst the technologies. And then the efficiency is another huge bonus. You're more efficient than electric and way more efficient than gas. Now, cooking doesn't account for a ton of energy in the average home, but it's nice to know that when you're cooking, it'll be more efficient on induction. Let's see here. One thing we talked about earlier was the air quality with induction. And we just really want to highlight that in an all electric kitchen, especially with an induction stove, you don't have any of the carbon monoxide or nitrogen dioxide emissions. And, studies are linking the gas in a stove to higher rates of asthma in children. And some of this indoor air pollution that they study with gas stoves that aren't vented, and again, venting is not required in the United States. It would be illegal outdoors, so we're talking huge emissions of poisonous gases. So another reason to go all electric in the kitchen that we should all highlight. Go ahead, next slide. So just a little recap on induction. You got that precise temperature control. You can get it the heat high or low, and you get instantaneous control. It's faster heating, faster cooling. It's safer from children. One last thing I'll say on the safety. If you don't have a pan on an induction cooktop, it won't turn on. It has to sense a pan, and otherwise it'll turn off. So for those of you who've left a burner on, like me, when I had old electric a bunch of times, that doesn't happen on induction anymore. It's easier to clean, and then you don't get those toxic byproducts. Great. So we'll finish with the key induction technologies and soon turn it over to Josh with the electric fireplace. This is something that I think a lot of people haven't seen or maybe skeptical of. I know I was. Brian and I went out to this all electric home in Hillsborough from a builder called Ichijo, and I was pretty much blown away by the electric fireplace insert. Let's just talk briefly about it. It plugs into a wall. You can kind of see the image there. It can have heating mode, so like a space heater, or you can just look at the flames in the summer, which is nice. You can, there's tons of media options, so you can control the little stones that are in there, and also the flame color. There's just a lot of flexibility and control, and it's a builder's dream. It can go anywhere. You don't need the outdoor venting. And we feel like these fireplaces are so good that you kind of have to see it to believe it. So we just did a little quick video of how great these things look.
Cue the romantic music. Yeah, you can all imagine.
So hopefully, I was really blown away by how impressed I was.
They are almost like too good to believe. I mean, you almost have to see it to really believe it. It's crazy.
And so, yeah, and Brian was always talking about how great his was. And I was like, yeah, yeah. And then when I saw one, I was like, whoa. So check them out. Again, you've got thermostats, that exact precision and temperature control, 110 volts. They're safer, that no residual heat. And then you got the styles and the sizes, the colors, and the different flames are very realistic. So I'll kick it over to Brian to close us out. And
yeah, just to quickly wrap up there, because I want to get on to Josh, but so those are the technologies we've talked about: highest efficiency, lowest carbon available. All this stuff, you know, even if they seem a little bit unusual or new to you, I think it's confidence building to know that the same people that are making the stuff that we've all grown up with our lives, the gas furnaces, et cetera, those same people are making the heat pump versions, and they all see the writing on the wall. They're all transitioning this way. That's where the R&D is going. Induction in heat pumps, et cetera. So all the trusted names are in this. The trusted installers are also doing this work. We would say, though, that there are some installers who are really familiar with this technology and more familiar, and it's best going with them. In fact, I've experienced people who will try to talk you out of it because they're just like to keep doing what they've been doing for years. So we have our own list of trusted installers. You can go to our website, electrifynow.com, and find even discounts from these people because they're people that we know and trust. I'm sure there are other good ones out there, but these are the ones that we know will do good work for you if you're interested in these things. I also just want to remind people that, you know, sign up for clean renewable energy from your utility. It's easy to do. It'll take all those carbon emissions to zero for these products. But there's also other great options like community solar. We're going to be doing a webinar on that later this year. And rooftop solar, obviously, is something that works here in the Northwest if your home is well positioned. And even Josh will be talking about that in the next session. The last thing I want to just mention is that from a consumer awareness standpoint, you know, a lot of people are just starting to hear about this, but you're going to be seeing, starting in California next week or next month, this campaign called The Switch Is On, which is going to be, essentially, it's almost like coming full circle back to where we started without Ronald Reagan involved, but it's essentially the equivalent kind of effort from utilities and related entities talking about the advantages of all electric construction for homeowners and consumers. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, and hopefully we'll start to see some of that beyond California into the Northwest here. All right, I want to turn it over to Josh. Going Street Commons. This place is amazing, beautiful, spectacular, modern, everything else. But I'm going to let Joe walk you through it because it's such a good example of what we're seeing. Joe mentioned that. Sorry, I'm going to let Josh do that. Joe mentioned that there's a couple of other projects going on in our area. Orange Splat's doing a development not far from Going Street in the Cully area neighborhood called Cully Green, which is also 100% electric. There's another one that we visited, that Joe mentioned out in Reed's Crossing that's being built by Ichi Joe. So there's a lot of this stuff going on, but we're going to focus on Going Street because it's such a great story. Take it away, Josh.
Cool. Thanks, guys. And, you know, may I say that, you know, we, you know, try to strive to build the best homes that we can. And we have not built a home that has natural gas in it for over 6 years now. And it's not because, you know, I'm some sort of iconoclast. I mean, I may be to a point, but it's because they actually are simply better. We can get better everything by going all electric. So not only does it have, you know, a higher quality home, but it's also higher performing, better indoor air quality, all those things. And we'll kind of touch on a bunch of that here with this project. So this is Going Street Commons. This is a project that we designed, our company, Birdsmouth Design-Build. There's 11 all electric homes here. It's planned development, so it's condo style. They're all gonna be Earth Advantage Net Zero Ready certified. And it's on 1.25 acres in Northeast Portland's Cully neighborhood, which is actually just about a half a block down the street from the Orange Splat project that Brian mentioned earlier. So you could literally pick up a tennis ball and give it a good huck, and you could throw it from one all electric community to the other. So it's kind of a special street, Northeast Going Street. And these things are all durable, comfortable, healthy, and extremely energy efficient. And we really did this to address climate change through the built environment. So the next slide.
Sorry.
So this is from a slide that we did back in 2017 when we purchased the acre and a third, and we started kind of putting together some precedent imagery of what we thought this could look like. And this was kind of our statement that we wanted to meet with this project. And it's just saying, we'll focus not just on the land and the buildings, but also the impact the built environment has on climate change, communities, and society. Our goal is to create a model that can be replicable and showcase how development can be done thoughtfully in the future by delivering this community at cost parity with typical custom residential construction. That was our goal, and I believe we met that goal. So this is kind of an overview of the site, kind of an L-shaped site. You can see there's 5 single-family homes and 3 duplexes. Each unit is 1,758 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, plus a loft that can be easily converted into another bedroom. So we're just starting with the building architecture. We wanted to just kind of keep it simple. It's the old acronym, you know, keep it simple, stupid. So we wanted to keep that form very simple so that it was easy to build, easy to insulate, easy to air seal, all those things, and also very performance. You know, it had a really great performance because of that. It also kept the cost down. You know, when we were laying out these houses on the site, we were very much looking at the solar access for every one of these homes, and also where we want to have things like the community gardens and the solar PV covered car parking in here. You know, this is similar to the child's drawing of a house, right? It's really simple, but we wanted to make that also attractive. So to kind of solve that problem, we turned to the Scandinavian vernacular to kind of lots of examples of homes up there that are, you know, really pretty modern things that are quite simple. So we kind of dovetail those two things together in terms of the form of the buildings. They're also aging in place. There's no thresholds. There's the master bathroom and bedrooms on the first floor, along with laundry on the first floor. We went with the planned development kind of condo thing because we were able to get more units on the site this way, which therefore was able to drive the cost down too. With some of the new zoning happening here in Portland with the residential infill project, we're going to be able to do even more than that, which will drive costs down too for these types of buildings. We wanted to make them replicable so that we could draw one floor plan and then replicate it throughout this project, and also focus on high indoor air quality. So the other thing we did is we have a high performance envelope. I know that's not the main thrust of this presentation, but it's also a critical component, making sure that, you know, you have these efficient systems that you keep that energy, be it heating or cooling or fresh air, inside that envelope of your building. So these are continuously insulated, they're airtight, they have triple pane windows, and they have fresh air systems with heat recovery that are designed into them. Part of the idea here too was to let the landscape be a part of the entire project. The homes are really meant to be the backdrop for the landscape. So being able to kind of keep things simple and kind of plain looking, I suppose, to let the landscape, once that grows in, really be the shining star here. We were able to keep all the existing trees on site, which was really played into when we were looking where to site the solar PV array and stuff like that. We did a lot of solar studies to figure out where the most photons were landing on this lot. We wanted to create habitat. We wanted to conserve water, so a lot of the plants were chosen specifically so that they don't use a lot of water. Edible plants, community building, again with the community gardens here, attracting pollinators, and beauty. Just to, again, if we're going to make homes that are quality homes, they're going to last a long time, they have to be pretty, otherwise they're going to get torn down. Some of the amenities with these homes, again, these are quality buildings. Nothing here is being compromised by going all electric. In fact, I'd argue the opposite. These have private yards. There's open space that can be shared, garden beds. You get the solar PV with electric car chargers built in. There's rainwater storage that waters all the gardens on site. There's covered bike storage, community play areas. There's fire pits. We got recycling areas that are very thoughtful and deliberate throughout this whole thing to make it easy to recycle, and off-street parking. So in terms of the all-electric design, here on the left, you can see this project, by the way, is slated to be complete. It's currently being built right now. by our friends over at Greenhammer. It's going to be complete probably end of January this year. So in about 2.5 months time, it'll be complete. So this was a photo I took a couple of weeks back, and we're just starting to see the posts go in that'll hold the electric solar PV car port there. And they all have induction ranges inside the homes. Here we're seeing just a picture of that. I also recently switched to induction at my house, and I really enjoy it. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. Again, there's a great webinar that was posted on the chat box that Electrify Now did with the chef cooking on it in real time. And it's a great thing to check out if you're interested in induction cooking. All the homes have induction cooking. Other things, it does have a heat pump hot water heating system. So it's one of those systems that Brian was showing earlier with the combination, kind of got the heat pump on top of the unit and then the tank below it. So that's how we're dealing with the hot water. We're getting about 225% efficiency on those hot water heaters there. And in terms of the space heating and cooling, and along with the fresh air, we're using a unique system that's called Minitaire is the name of the product. And what it is, it's one of these magic box systems that does all of this in one unit. So it does the heating and cooling with the heat pump. It does not have an exterior unit. So it's just one thing that goes on the inside of the house. It's relatively small. It's about 36 inches long, about 14 inches high, maybe 2 feet deep. And it also has the heat recovery ventilator inside of it, all in the same box. So we're allowed to, we can bring the fresh air into the house and filter it with a MERV 15 filter, which takes out particles much smaller than smoke dust, which was a problem recently here in the West Coast, still is. So the great thing about this unit is that it's really small, so we can locate it anywhere within our conditioned space. It's extremely efficient because it's using one motor to power not only the heat pump, but also the HRV. So you're getting these like levers that are really knocking up that efficiency. And we only had to install one of these units in one set of ducting, which means that we were able to save, roughly $15,000 per house by not installing a completely separate system. And when you're building 11 houses, do the math, that adds up pretty quickly. So we're getting some really great levers, really high quality air, great heating and cooling for much less of a price, and it's all electric. So it's a win-win-win scenario.
Hey, Josh, so is this system, you said that there were some ducts. It's a ducted system.
It is a ducted system, correct, yeah. So it does take, it's got an intake from the sidewall of the house, and it's got an exhaust up on the roof. And then it runs the conditioned and filtered air to all the different locations in the house. If you look to the right of the light on the ceiling there, you can see one of the diffusers in the living room. So it is a ducted, yeah.
Okay.
System.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
We did a lot of energy modeling with this project. So we were able to orient the exact windows, the heights and widths of the windows so that we can get really great daylighting in these buildings. So that they're not pointing directly south and you get a lot of glare. They're also not just on the north side where it's really dark. So these buildings, even without the additional LED lighting, just on their own accord are very bright on the inside. That was very deliberate. And then with the rest of the lighting that we have, the active lighting, it's all LED lighting in there. And, I'll read through this. How are these homes different than a code level home or a home with natural gas or otherwise? The code's a minimum standard to do. Anything less would be the worst house you can legally build. These houses are extremely quiet. The walls are 12 to 14 inches thick. They're airtight. The Minitaire heating and cooling system is extremely quiet. You really can't hear it. Same with the hot water heater. It's very quiet. Really, the entire volume of air is exchanged once every 3 hours in this building, and it's continuously filtered through a 15 micron filter. So you're always getting high levels of oxygen. Carbon dioxide levels don't spike. You really feel good living in these homes. They're very comfortable. There's no hot or cold spots anywhere in this house. There's no drafts. It's got a consistent indoor temperature year round, no matter what the weather is. That's due to the envelope. It's also due to these systems and the all electric systems in here. I talked about the natural light. The windows are intentionally sized and positioned, no glare, no dark dreary areas. These homes will last a long time. We're aiming for 150 years for these things. To use a counterpoint, the average age lifespan of a new home in the United States is 25 years, believe it or not, for a code level home. That's prior to a major system like all the siding and windows have to be completely replaced or there's major failures. Remarkable stat. These things are really designed to be multi-generational homes that require very little upkeep, very little, elbow grease that needs to be put into these buildings. And they're computer modeled, they're site specific. These homes are designed for the exact environmental conditions found at 4905 Northeast Going Street. We, track the sun and measure it and run it through computer models for this exact site. And they're all electric. There's no energy bills once they're offset with solar PV, no natural gas, and no combustion inside these homes. So with that, that's the end of the Going Street Commons presentation.
That is so cool.
Josh, there was a couple of questions, about the just the name of the system for the HRV and heat pump combined. People were.
Yeah, Minotaur, Minotair.
Sorry, say that again. M-I-N.
I'll type it up here. Minotair. Boom, it's in the chat.
Thank you.
And you can Google that. And there's lots
There's a couple of good questions, which I'm going to try to track through some. We've got a few minutes left here. Someone was talking about wood fireplaces and if they're polluting. Wood fireplaces are terrible. I mean, you should not use a wood fireplace for the sake of your own health, not to mention the carbon emissions, et cetera. Burning wood in general is highly problematic, even in the very best wood burning stoves, which have better air quality considerations. But I think if you have an indoor air monitor and a wood burning fireplace or wood burning stove, you will see how bad it is. It's not a good thing. I would highly not recommend it, and it's not good from a carbon standpoint.
There's a good article by Sam Harris who wrote an article about this for those of you that are into him, but comparing the particulates to a diesel car running inside your house as a a wood burning fireplace. Also, I'll mention these homes, like if you were to put a wood burning fireplace in there, it would be such a powered heat load. You would just be opening all the windows. It's just way too much power.
A couple questions about renewable natural gas. I think we answered those, but hey, I think there's a place for renewable natural gas in the large ecosystem of our energy solutions that are necessary, but pumping it into your home, first of all, it's unlikely to even happen in any kind of volume that's going to get anywhere near offsetting the kind of emissions that come from natural gas. So even the experts say, don't hold your breath waiting for it. And the second thing is that, even if you do that, there's still all these advantages that we've talked about with electrification still exist, and renewable ones, they're still going to give you all those emissions, indoor air quality problems, et cetera. It doesn't solve any of those issues. So renewable natural gas might be great for on-site combustion in various places to get to, take advantage of that methane captured. I love that, but I don't think it's an answer to the gas pipes that are being, that leak and that are being pumped all over our neighborhoods, et cetera. They explode occasionally. Not a fan, but we'll let them use that in the places where it makes sense. Also, some good questions about heat recovery systems. Sorry, what was that? It was about the HRV type solutions. I think the solution that Josh was talking about was awesome because it's all in one unit, but maybe Josh, you could speak to what a separate HRV looks like and how that works.
Yeah. So, we're making homes airtight so that we don't, so that we keep that energy, that heating or cooling in the house and doesn't leak out. It also has a lot of benefits to moisture management and durability of homes. So it's great for the home, but, people do breathe and we want to be able to breathe fresh air in this home. So we have to bring fresh air into the homes, but we don't want to just bring cold air or in the summertime, hot air directly into the home. So what we do is we add this thing called a heat recovery ventilator or an energy recovery ventilator. HRV or ERV. And essentially what it does, it has an airstream of that cold air. Let's say it's wintertime, that's coming into the house. And then there's the exhausting air that's coming from the house that's already conditioned. It passes alongside that incoming cold air and transfers heat into that incoming cold air, but it doesn't mix, it just travels alongside. So by the time that fresh air from the outside comes in, it's tempered. And these systems will capture upwards of 97% of all heat that is being exhausted in the house. So that's how we solve the fresh air solution. And these systems also have filtration in them too. So that's how we're getting a lot of these pollens and environmental particulates and smoke and stuff like that filtered out of the air. So you're capturing that energy that you spent all this time trying to retain in your house while providing fresh air.
You guys see any other questions that we haven't touched on? There's some good ones about, how to insulate older homes. I would suggest, I think Josh has a lot of experience with that, but that's not something we're necessarily going to cover off on here. It's a great question though. Insulation is super important. If you don't have a well insulated space, a lot of these devices that we're talking about aren't going to work very well. Particularly the heat pump systems they're going to struggle if you have a poorly insulated space. So that's important to do. Josh, any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, retrofits are difficult, but I would say just make sure. There was a comment in here asked, someone's HVAC contractor said that, the heat pumps can't do what the gas fired appliances do. Not necessarily true. I just replaced I have a 1925 Craftsman home in Portland that's pretty leaky. It's not insulated everywhere. I'm like the chef with the kids that are going hungry or that kind of thing. I just haven't had the time. But I did switch out our gas furnace with a ducted heat pump, and we're having no issues. We hit some 90+ degree days this summer, and it was perfectly cool inside of our house. There probably are some homes out there that are huge, that have no insulation, single pane windows, where even the biggest horsepower heat pump really isn't going to be quite enough. But I would argue, even with your gas system there, it's not really going to be comfortable anyways.
Or you're fortunate on gas. Yeah. Our house is older too. Our house was built in 1925 and we have a heat pump, no problem. It's got decent insulation, but it's nothing like what Josh is talking about with new construction. So it's entirely possible. But yeah, it's worth thinking about insulation.
Good resources on Green Building Advisor. I put that in the chat for a lot of these questions about insulation and envelope related things. And I'll also pitch the Earth Advantage Sustainable Homes Professional course, where it goes into a deeper dive about all of these issues with the envelope and building science and stuff like that. I posted a link to that on the chat box also.
Someone asked about cooling function of heat pumps versus traditional air conditioners. In general, a heat pump is going to be way more efficient than an air conditioner. I mean, the requirements for efficiency on air conditioners is quite a bit lower than heat pumps. So in general, your heat pump is going to be way more efficient than an existing air conditioner unit you've got.
Yeah, I mean, an air conditioner just is a heat pump, but a lot of the newer systems are just, they've got variable speed motors. They've got just a lot of different refrigerants and different ways of moving that across more efficient fans and stuff like that. So you just get a much higher efficiency than your old school, loud box air conditioners.
Some questions about hoods. Yes, ventilation. You should always have a hood. I think it's one of the things I want to stress from this is, we were talking about the indoor air pollution from combustion, which you don't have that if you have an induction stove. But with any kind of cooking, particularly if you get into high temperatures, there's chemical reactions that happen. It doesn't matter what the fuel source is, you're going to want a hood. So I would highly recommend good ventilation for cooking, regardless of your fuel source. But with induction, you don't have the gas combustion, which is adding to the other sources of potential problems. And you cook at lower heat, you're not going to see that. And there's a lot of good reasons to cook at lower heat, by the way, too. That could be a whole nother webinar, but we won't get into that today. Are you guys seeing anything else that we should touch on, or should we wrap it up here?
Some people have some really specific questions. People are welcome to email me. I'm Josh at birdsmouthpdx.com. I'm happy to take some of these questions offline too.
Yeah, and Joe, we'll have a kind of wrap up email that goes out to everyone who signed up, right? And we'll links and things.
Yeah, we'll share slides, and we'll also share the YouTube video recording from this presentation.
Great. Well, maybe we should call it a wrap then, huh? And I want to thank all of you for tuning in today. And like Josh said, if you have specific questions, ping us. We're happy to talk to people. It's one of the things that we get a lot of satisfaction is helping people to do these things. Sometimes they're not easy. They're not that fun to buy a new furnace, but we can help you take some of the pain out of it. So don't hesitate to contact us if you have some specific questions. And if you're living here in the Portland area, we can definitely help you in terms of some of the things that are kind of specific to this area. Yes, we'll be sending links out. And if you have a chance, check out our website, electrifynow.net. Tell your friends about it. There's a lot of good information there about these exact topics that we've talked about. Thanks, and good luck, everybody, with your electrification projects, whether that's replacing your water heater or building an all-new home. And we appreciate your attention and your time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.